Hi everyone, and I am going to go ahead and get us started. My name is McNulty, and I'm an instructional designer. I'm an instructional designer at the University of Central Florida. I'm joined with my colleague Dubach, textbook portability librarian, Sarah Norris, communication librarian, and virtually we have Amanda Major, who is also an instructional designer and assistant director of the Pegasus Lab. It's probably worth noting that we are from Orlando. So we've got some weather going on at home. We might be a little bit distracted, so I hope you'll forgive us if our brains are a little bit less focused than they might have been otherwise. And with that, I'll turn this to Lily for going for a methodology. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our agenda, Rebecca just went over, so I'm going to go straight into methods. If you do want access to our slides and to our handout, please feel free to go to that QR code, but I'll get started with methods. So of course, this is a literature overview. So how did we decide what databases to use? Then what did we do with those? What did we find? As far as databases are concerned, we chose Web of Science, ERIC, as well as Library Literature and Information Science Full Text. Web of Science, the reasoning there was because of the breadth and depth that it would have that would cover both AI and OER across many disciplines. We also chose ERIC because of the educational aspect of the journals included in there. And then of course, library literature related database because OER initiatives are often housed in the library. So that made sense. As far as our search terms that we used, as you can see, we used a set of search terms related to AI. And then we use a set of search terms related to OER. Some of those were broader than others, which necessitated thinking about, okay, how do we weed out some of these that are really not applicable to what we're looking at? Next slide, please. So our inclusion criteria, we were looking for peer-reviewed academic journal articles that we could get to and that we could read and understand. So they needed to be in English for us. And of course, those articles focus on both AI and OER as we are interested in that intersection and to see what has been published. The exclusion criteria, we were not looking for conference papers, we were not looking for theses or dissertations, books or book chapters, preprints or retracted articles. So we excluded those. We of course excluded ones we could not access. We excluded ones that were not in English and we excluded ones that were not peer reviewed. And then what got a little trickier is that we needed to exclude ones that didn't have the main focus areas of both AI and OER. So some were really in depth with OER and even mentioned AI in one sentence that wasn't quite enough, and vice versa. Next slide, please. So what we found, so in Web of Science, we did an extra step to exclude the OER we were not looking for. Which you can see is oxygen evolution reaction. Yeah, I don't have those memorized. But again, there are other OERs out there that we, totally unrelated. So the results were 249 after we removed the retracted articles. And then from there, going into our other two databases, we deduplicated. So we didn't include anything we had already found from Web of Science. We found 5 from Library Literature and Information Sciences. And then we found 50 from ERIC. Next slide, please. All right. Now, we recognize that the 3 databases we had selected did not include all the journals that we really wanted to check into. A few of those really weren't indexed by very many databases at all. So we did go into Google Scholar for the most recent years. So from 2023 onward, looked for articles that relate to artificial intelligence and open educational resources and tried to eliminate conference proceedings because there were quite a number of those. So on September 13th, there were about 1,700 results in Google Scholar, and we collected about 191 that looked promising, which then reduced down to 102. And there were about 4 accidental duplicates in there, so subtract 4 from that 102. Next slide, please. Along the way, this project, we utilized a number of tools. EndNote was where we put our articles and our information there and helped with deduplication. It was not a perfect system. And then Microsoft Excel is where we put the article information, and then as a team, we worked on finding those themes among those articles. For the journals that we located through Google Scholar, if any were unclear about the peer review status, we did use Ulrich's Web, the global serials directory, to assist with that. And we can't talk about an AI topic without mentioning AI tools we used. So scholars and expedited our article review so we could see a little bit more about what the articles were about and some themes. Claude AI helped with these a little bit too. We dabbled with Site AI. We thought, oh, this would be great to develop a dashboard that just reviewed the articles we identified. But unfortunately, it glitched, it froze, it removed articles willy-nilly a little bit. So we think it's a promising tool, but not quite to the point that we could use it for this specific project. And with that said, I will turn it over to our speaker, Amanda Major, to talk about our results.
Thanks so much, Lily. And as soon as you turned it over to me, the lawnmower passed by. So hopefully you're not hearing what I'm hearing. We reviewed 491 articles overall, which led to 276 articles reviewed. From those, we identified 18 articles that met our criteria. And that led to...
Amanda, can you hold on 1 second? We lost your sound.
You all lost it in the room, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Do
very.
you hear me okay now?
Your volume dropped a bit. Are you able to increase volume somehow?
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just hold my mic nearby. So 491 articles screened, 276 reviewed. That gave us 18 articles that met our criteria, and that led to deriving 11 themes. Some were anticipated, some emerged that we did not expect, very few though, and some we just condensed because it really was talking about the same thing. Multiple articles addressed multiple themes. We covered many types of articles, case studies, there were 4, general research, 4, 2 opinion pieces, and 8 actual research studies. Now, ChatGPT was the most popular tool that we used. Chatbots were mentioned a few times as well. In 2018, the publications we found were just one article that we reviewed. Then the timeline skipped out 3 years, or a few years, and then we reviewed 3 from that year, 2022. That was the same year that ChatGPT was released for public use. In 2023, 5 articles were published and 9 in 2024. So you can see that the knowledge base is increasing. Now, Sarah will walk us through the themes, these articles that we have identified.
All right, thank you, Amanda. So as Amanda said, I'm going to talk through some of the themes that arose. Amanda did mention that there were a variety of themes that we did condense or sort of subcategorize, and you'll see a bit of that play out here. As you can see from our themes here, they were pervasive across different articles. So many articles did touch upon many different themes, and we'll take a look at that. I do think it's also important to articulate that many of these themes were already themes that we were talking about in the OER space broadly. So it's just, sort of moving that along with AI integrated into the same kinds of considerations and themes that we were thinking about in the literature. So next slide. So as you'll see from this slide, we do have a series of quotes, and you'll see that across every single theme that we explored. We decided to include quotes for everyone for a variety of different reasons, but we thought from a main reason, it provides a little bit of context about the themes, what each author or researcher was talking about, and some of the key takeaways. You'll also notice as we explore the different themes, quotes and different researchers' perspectives may have varied on similar types of topics. And that's just the nature of the scholarly conversation, but we thought that was worth mentioning as well. So our first theme is something that is near and dear to my heart as a solid communication librarian on intellectual property and legal issues. So within the legal space, data privacy and intellectual property were, of course, two things that came to the fore. Key takeaways is that copyright law and intellectual property laws globally are in flux right now, especially related to artificial intelligence. That's going to change over time. And so from my perspective, thinking about this as someone who works with IP, perhaps one of the reasons that many of the researchers didn't touch on this area quite as much is because it's an evolving area. So one thing that we'd like to see in future research is if that trend spikes up in terms of coverage within research, touching on different kinds of aspects related to that. Next slide. Challenges was certainly the area that every single researcher and article that we explored touched on. And that is certainly no surprise, as the intersection of artificial intelligence and OER definitely presents some challenges and considerations that we're all working through that are going to probably be around for a very long time. And so those were key things that many of those authors did touch on. Ethical considerations was a key aspect, right? How do we act responsibly, ethically, and morally with artificial intelligence as we use it within OERs? I was just in another session about science students and plagiarism and the proliferation of that in that discipline. And so even from an ethical consideration related to pragmatics, like plagiarism, right? That was a concern or a question with artificial intelligence. Inequality, so equity and inclusion was certainly a large concern. One of the articles that we have teased here, I thought had an interesting takeaway related to actually arguing that perhaps AI would impact the digital divide negatively. So not providing access and equity to students for a variety of different reasons. Perhaps it's because those tools may require subscriptions and costs. Perhaps it's because of the AI literacy and not being able to understand or navigate using large language models and prompts. So that was an interesting perspective that we didn't necessarily anticipate seeing in the results. And algorithmic bias, that certainly came up a bit earlier today about bias within tools that we use. But certainly artificial intelligence, if you are engaged in that area, I'm sure you've probably seen lots of interesting ways in which implicit and explicit bias comes out of large language models in particular. Next slide. But of course, with challenges also comes benefits. There are a lot of beneficial reasons to potentially utilize artificial intelligence within OER in some way or open pedagogy broadly. And these were a few that came out of the research that we discovered in the literature. And of course, a really good intersection with all things open, this idea of access, inclusion, equity, all were things that were brought up with regard to potentially utilizing AI. This on the access piece, there's a really good quote that sort of has the flip side from the previous slide where it said AI may be a negative in the digital divide. In this particular quote, the researcher says that it may be a positive piece. I thought from the keynote discussion, one thing that really prompted me to think about this quote was this idea of monolingualism. And in this particular quote, they're talking about the linguistic digital divide and how AI might actually help with that particular piece. And then just broadly, responsible AI can be used as a powerful tool to include different cultures, beliefs, and backgrounds. Next slide. And accessibility was another theme that came up. This one wasn't necessarily as heavily mentioned in the literature. And we were talking about this morning. I think one of the reasons that might be is that much of the research right now is more theoretical in focus, less pragmatic. So there were a lot less case studies of practical applications. And so in the future, we'll probably see a bit more of that. Next slide. Learning aspects or the pedagogical piece is also deeply important. And here are a few takeaways here from anything from AI helping create more AI in a swift way, but also helping those who are utilizing OER or creating OER by efficiencies, fact checking, prompt crafting, even copyright checking. Those could be different kinds of things that they can be used for. but also in the classroom as well for students, having this individualized, personalized research and teaching and learning opportunity by utilizing AI. Next slide. And then I'll wrap up some of the themes with future implications and lead it over to Rebecca to kind of wrap us up. But scale and impact are certainly a couple of considerations. So with AI potentially being utilized to help scale up, so using it to help provide efficiencies, creating workflows, generating larger amounts of OER in a swifter time period. And I know that that can take a lot of time to create an OER, so this could be a tool and strategy to help with that. That was certainly one assertion from researchers. And again, other efficiencies, transcribing, annotating. And then something that really, I think was compelling from our keynote speakers today was talking about impact, going beyond the COOP as a framework, as a method for tracking impact. Is there a potential role for impact using artificial intelligence? And then certainly the UN, the SDGs is always going to be a consideration, and it was great to see that some of the researchers were mentioning that in the research as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Rebecca.
So from there, we're looking at what we're expecting in the future. And this goes back to moving away from some of the theoretical implications that we're seeing in literature to some of the more practitioner-based. That's where I come in terms of my day job is how are we advising people to use these tools or not use these tools in a way that continues the themes that we would like to see and attempts to mitigate some of the challenges. Can we come together as a community to think through what best practices really look like based on the framework that we see right now? So the ongoing conversations are happening. We're seeing them more in public forums rather than necessarily in scholarly sources. We're expecting that to continue to shift as the conversations continue. We're seeing copyright implications, waiting for legal precedent in landmark cases to understand where the legal aspects are taking us. Right now, there's a lot of questions still. Seems in the theme of just about time we're having these conversations, even in the absence of the legal landmark, just to understand the nuances of the questions that we're asking and to think through where we might be able to continue to refine this. And then just advances in AI, changes in functionality, when this becomes baked into more applications, how we're able to separate out a tool from a function. We're just not sure where this is going to go, but it's changing every 32 seconds. Next slide. And then just looking at the potential for scaling, keeping those challenges in mind, keeping those ethical considerations in mind, but some of just the dreaming aspects. If we can answer the questions or agree on the questions that could help us facilitate models that perpetuate what we're hoping to amplify and avoid perpetuating bias and stereotypes, problematic themes. Can we use these to facilitate scale? Can we scale inclusive materials? Can we use student engagement and involvement to help students to get a voice inside the materials that we're using? Is this a tool that can help perpetuate that? Is this something that can perpetuate access to materials, increase awareness, engagement, target communications and distributions? Is there a way of leveraging this technology to pinpoint the recommendations based on syllabi, based on learning objectives? Can we utilize this? And then scaling accessibility. Some of the practical, pragmatic, is there a way to use this technology, this moment to increase captioning of materials, leverage the open license to take existing materials and increase the accessibility, increase the access opportunities, really just amplify what we have already in a way that saves time for the humans to review and the humans to add the value that AI can. Can we use the tool to get us to a place where the humans have? And I think that about covers that. Next slide, please. So we have 5 minutes. We would love questions, conversations. We've got a lot of questions still, so we might turn them back on you.
If I may chime in. We do have,
The audience.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, thanks so much. Could you please talk a little more about that scaling accessibility? What you found in the literature?
So one of the most interesting things is this is themes that were coming up from before ChatGPT entered the scene, is just sort of wondering what kind of tool could scale accessibility. Could scale captioning, could scale alt text, could scale the preview of image. Any of the solid things that take so much time for humans, can we use this tool in a way that takes some of that time away? So the literature doesn't have much on that yet. We're expecting it to continue, but the themes are there. What sort of wish list themes? The articles are talking about if we had a way to do X, Y, and Z that would help to scale access.
Yeah, I'm wondering if ChatGPT can do that. There's another tool called Julius.ai and it's used for spreadsheet analysis. And basically what you do is you give it a prompt and then it generates a Python program and then executes it. So I'm wondering if maybe that program could be used to say review like a slide deck or a book according against like the wave model and remediate the work. So I'm gonna try that when I go take a break. I'm gonna try that on Julius.ai. See if it'll work.
Until I know,
Yeah,
if it works, let us know.
okay.
We do have a question in the chat. Karen wants to know about copyright issues of using AI to develop OER.
I like that they handed it straight over to me. So it's complicated, right? There are so many complexities, and that is still something that we're trying to figure out with the copyright space. And the idea of incorporating that into either fully public domain content or CC licensed content, right? That we're remixing, we're reusing, and in the spirit of open, how do you do that with artificially intelligence produced content? Now, if we are following current copyright law, and if something is produced by generative AI under the US copyright law, it is in theory, it depends, right? That it should be in the public domain, there's no copyright attached to it. And yet that is evolving, that is nuanced. There are so many legal cases surrounding large language models being trained on copyrighted content. And so we're probably going to have to see where those case laws lie, as Rebecca mentioned, because that may impact what the output is and what the intellectual property is around that. So it's definitely nuanced. It's a great question. I think we're all still trying to figure out the answers to that.
And last question, you have 1 minute. Can you explain a little more about what Scholars C was used for?
That's neat. So my division is experimenting with AI tools for operational efficiencies, and one of those is we were given licenses to certain tools. Scholars was one of them. We use that just to excited. We use that just to do an initial review of the sources and to find things like oxygen evolution reaction and oxygen excess ratio, the OER terms that were not what we were looking for, but we're still being caught in our certain parameters. So first level review, it helped us to eliminate sources that were clearly not what we were hoping to capture. And then from there, we can prioritize the human review, but it was decently efficient. It was less time than clicking through and looking through the abstract, just in terms of number of clicks. So not a failed experiment, at least as we are yesterday. Thank you. All right, thank you everyone so much.